All right. And before our learning associates get us started, we're going to begin with a chalice lighting, which is also itself a recording.
The opportunity has come to us again to weave a singular tapestry of life from countless strands of dazzling difference and a renewed quest for common purpose.
The time has come again for your hand and my hand to choose each other's company, for our connected embrace to guide us toward deeper understanding of ourselves and each other.
The opportunity has come for your voice and 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 my voice to assemble our voice. And for our voice to awaken melodies of unmitigated hope, to lift up songs that chase after justice.
With a woven will, we can make sacred work out of this moment.
With a gathered spirit, we can build communion, even in the most conventional space. So come, whoever you are. Let us take up the challenge and possibility of being one with each other.
And let us learn once again what love can do when there truly is a we.
And let the evidence of our decision give strength to each of our lives for all our living.
That was a General Assembly chalice lighting. And I think I'll pass it to Mary then.
Okay, I've got some opening words from the UUA. And flowers chant their wordless songs of color and scent, delighting like a joyful choir at dawn. I breathe in with my whole body, feeling how it is as we grow, quietly rising together among springs green and dew. The rhythm of seasons rolls ahead, and I, a shy blossom, voice my small prism of song. I am singing of the wonder of how roots so love the buds they bid them grow, unseen as they are, while the buds never look back.
Thank you, Mary. I am Ann Sherpick, and I am one of the Learning Associates. And some of us might be wondering what the Learning Associates are, so I'll give a little introduction. The Learning Associates is one of the associate committees at South Church that is committed to the learning component of the mission of South Church, to strive to deepen Unitarian Universalist faith formation and relationships within and among communities of our congregation and the larger UUA community. And that last part is important because tonight we offer, as part of our mission, we offer programs called What's Up? Here we are tonight on one of these, which is a discussion series for members to learn about and connect with the wider UUA community. So tonight's theme was intended to provide an overview of the UUA General Assembly that is coming up this year, and as well as information on how to be a delegate. The Please note that the members of the Learning Associates committee are have LA next to their names. We've got Diana, Mary, myself, Lori Bilby, Valerie, and Kirsten, and Rebecca is a liaison member of the committee as well. So we've got a bunch of us here from that committee. And that is where I will wrap up.
Okay, so we're here to talk about General Assembly. So what is General Assembly actually? And I think Kirsten is going to play a video to explain it for us.
I am. Here we go. There's this cute little video that the folks at the UUA made that described a little bit about General Assembly. So we're going to play it. And just to cue you up, Myra and Kirsten Vernon, after we're done, we're hoping that the two of you, having attended General Assembly at times in your life, would be willing to then share what's missing from this, a general overview of what is General Assembly. So here we go.
There's no sound.
None at all?
No, I didn't hear any sound from that video.
Okay,
I don't know
hold
if
on
other
a second.
people did.
You should have. All right, hold on.
I hear you, but I didn't hear any sound from that.
It's just music, but you should have heard it. So let me make sure I hit the right thing. Share sound. Here we go. Fortunately for us, you'd let me know 30 seconds in. Let's try that again. Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a little flashy little UUA amp up, and you may have noted that that General Assembly this year is going to be a virtual event. It's not an in-person event this year. So everything was framed around that, of like, you can access it from your living room and you can use whatever device and all of that stuff. But now I would invite, we have two members guesting with us today who have been to General Assembly recently, and Judith, who's been there a long time before. So I'm going to invite you all to share what things weren't in that video that are things that you love about General Assembly.
I'll start. So there are some really great things about it, especially in person, which it won't be this year. But when I went several years ago in person, it was very exciting to be in a convention center with 5,000 other Unitarian Universalists from all over the country. And to me, making that connection, understanding that we are not just South Church, a small community unto ourselves, but that we are part of this much bigger community of people whose churches in many ways operate the same, in many ways operate very differently, and learning all about that and meeting people and hearing all these different perspectives, all coming from people who have the same core values, was just really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and really life affirming in a lot of ways. So that was great about being there in person. What I think is great, and I'll just back up a second and say that I think it's really important to understand that we are just one piece of something much bigger than ourselves. What's really interesting, both going in person and online, the last 2 years I went online, is just hearing in discussions. So there are workshops that if you're a full registrant, you can choose from, a huge number of workshops every day that you can attend and participate in. But there are also the business meetings. And if you're a delegate, you have a vote at the business meetings. And just hearing different people's perspectives on all of the issues. So things will come up about policies that the UUA is going to create about things, or position papers on where we stand on various social action issues, as well as administrative decisions. Being part of this huge discussion of people, again, with many different points of view, was really, for me, a really wonderful and growthful experience. So, for example, last year, there were some very heated issues up for discussion. I frankly have no memory of what they were, but they were strong feelings on both or many sides of each issue. And even when it's online, you can sign up, you want to be on the pro side or the con side of whatever the proposition is. And people have, maybe 2 minutes to speak. And I found myself, although I thought that I knew how I was going to vote on something before the discussion even happened, I found myself constantly my mind opening up, and somebody would speak on the other side and I would think, oh yeah, I can really see that point of view, maybe I'll vote that way. And then somebody else would speak on the other side, and they make sure that there are people from both sides represented. And I just kept changing my mind. And while I was internally somewhat confused about that, I thought it was just a fantastic opportunity to really just hear people speaking from their heart and to understand why they had a completely different perspective than somebody else on issues that are important to all of us. And then based on that, rather than just what I've been thinking in my own head, to be able to make, my decision about how I was going to vote. So I just think it's just your mind. My mind is just open in so many ways, both from the workshops and from the business meetings themselves.
Thank you, Myra.
I'll talk about kind of attending in general, and then I'll talk about being a delegate. I went to GA last summer in Pittsburgh in person with my father, and it was my first time at GA, and I was there as a delegate. It was like Myra said, I mean, it absolutely connects you to the wider world of Unitarian Universalism. I know we talked about that a lot, in my time as a learning associate, but there was really nothing quite like, being there in person to, experience it with literally, thousands of people. there are a number of worship services every single day, you know, for multiple days, and it feels like going to mega church. I've never been to mega church, but it seemed, you know, it was kind of an awesome experience to be in a room with that many people, you know, going to church. The music was incredible. And everything was themed, and kind of built upon itself, and there's a lot of um participation in leading the worship by the local community of wherever um the event is. So in this case it was Pittsburgh, so it was really kind of interesting to kind of also get a feel for, you know, the clergy, you know, in that area. um the um the workshops, I went to a few. I went to one about UU the vote, and I went to another one about class
Mm.
in churches, about inclusivity in terms of classism. Um, it was interesting because even though it was an in-person event, it, it was hybrid, right? Because people could also attend virtually. So from the workshops to the business meetings to um, you know, worship, everything was, you know, accessible and really run through technology, and it was pretty high tech and kind of impressive. And so I can imagine how that rolls over very well to an entirely virtual event that, you know, feels connected. Um, the I think my favorite part of attending was really two things. One, I kind of got a sense, more of a sense of the importance of the UUA, and my first window into that was there's a service called the Service of the Living Tradition, and they celebrate all like outgoing and incoming ministers, and there were many more outgoing. And this was and there was a lot of discussion about like what the UUA provides in terms of ministerial support, and, you know, support for people who you know, want to become ministers. And so it just seemed to me to reinforce the kind of the value of the UUA in terms of, you know, kind of providing sort of a lifeblood of the future, you know, of the entire you know, Unitarian Universalism, um, you know, religion. Um, and then the other thing was really participating in the business meetings. You know, like Myra said, it was just absolutely fascinating to hear all of the you know, the heated discussion you know, on you know, all sides of an issue. um the Another thing that was a big part of the event and the business meeting was the fact that there was the outgoing president of the UUA was being celebrated, and then there was a vote for a new incoming president, and also the installation of the incoming president, which was really kind of neat to participate in. Um, Last year, we were talking a lot about the Article 2 Study Commission, and then in the business meetings of GA, there were votes about the proposed amendments to Article 2. And what they did was they got a lot of feedback, and they rolled all that feedback up into you know, kind of a handful of proposed amendments, and then over the course of several days there were votes on these amendments, preceded by a lot of debate. And like Myra said, sometimes I didn't know, how I was going to vote, but to me, it was really actually clear after hearing, all sides of an issue. And I took it very seriously, kind of being a representative of South Church. And so I was just concerned with making, listening and making sure that I felt, good about how I was voting. The people on the Article 2 Study Commission were there. And we met them, and they were sitting right in front of us, and the UUA board was right there in the business meeting, and sometimes they would speak up about their position on a particular issue, and that was something that kind of helped to inform my vote. And I my dad and I were on the same page every time, and however we voted was always the way the vote went, which was kind of felt confirming. One of the most heated issues was about the divestiture of the investment in fossil fuels, and there's a very large youth presence at GA, and several of these youth were present at a challenging, I don't know what you'd call it, protest, I guess. And so they were there, right? And they had a very strong position on this issue, and it was quite compelling. And then a number of business leaders of the UUA would explain like how they totally agree with supporting this issue, but not in this way at this time. So that's kind of why the vote, why that didn't pass. But it was really heartfelt, to see just how impassioned these youth were about these issues, and that extended to the amendments to Article 2, and there were quite a few people who came to GA and didn't know that this was happening. And they were quite upset. So it was really, really kind of emotional, but it was also interesting just the way the business is conducted, and everything's in covenant, and and there are chaplains and people you can talk to if there's conflict, and but everything was just very, very respectful. So even though people had different very different views, everything was just conducted and on a pretty kind of impressive level of getting along, and all done with love. So that was kind of neat to witness, but it was very intense. I would say, a good experience, but an intense experience.
Gosh, thank you, Kirsten, for that, and Myra. That was wonderful. Does anyone have questions from what Myra and Kirsten just shared? Anything that wasn't clear or that they'd like any clarity on? Yeah, Valerie.
Thank you, Kirsten and Myra. That was really informative, and I appreciate your share. Just how many subjects did you actually get to vote on?
Oh gosh,
There were,
Give or take.
trying to remember how many amendments there were, like
Trying to remember
11 or
too.
12 or something.
Last year was a lot of, there was a lot of amendments leading up to the vote on whether or not to adopt Article 2 for a trial year. It did pass, the adoption passed. Several of the amendments were like the days leading up to the Saturday vote. So there were several amendments on Article 2. There was the question of whether or not to divest investment in fossil fuels, which had to do with the endowment. And the conflict with that was it was actually largely young adults, not youth so much. There were some youth, but mostly
young adults,
young adult Unitarian Universalists that were really pushing for divestment. But the way I understood what the UUA leadership financial management was concerned about was the wording of the action was immediate and total, in a way that my sense was that their concern was this is the endowment of all of these different congregations, and making a decision, a divestment decision about their endowment funds as a sort of universal action felt they were concerned about how congregations would feel about that. And that was what I was hearing them say as their main challenge with the way that divestment issue was raised. The young adults, as you can imagine, being a young adult facing our climate crisis, were pretty adamant, and it was pretty tense. The other piece was, which came up the year before, was the question of, are we better off having a seat at the table with fossil fuel companies by having money invested there and being therefore able to influence boardroom choices that are being made by those companies versus not? That was the last year that it came up. That was more of the discussion. And these are big questions and complex ones, and it was definitely visible. There's also an action of immediate witness around.
There were like 5 different.
There were several, and
things.
2 of them passed.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what an action of immediate witness is when the UUA puts out a sort of a statement on a particular issue. So
DACA was one of them.
DACA was one of them. Several years ago, there was an action of immediate witness in response to George Floyd. Arthur maybe remembers. I don't know if any of you remember the other action of immediate witness last year that passed.
Yeah, and there was one about something Cop City.
Yeah, the giant police training compound that's being that they're trying to build in Atlanta, which continues to be something that the UUSC and wider Universalist activists.
I think there was a trans-related one too.
I believe you're correct. Good memory. But yeah, I don't remember how many votes exactly, but the governance sessions are robust, and the agenda is pretty one thing to the next. They do a good job of trying to anticipate in advance and do pre-conversations with interest groups. So for example, with Article 2, that's coming up again for a vote this year. If you're not familiar with Article 2, they went through a 2-year process of looking at the language that articulates through the UUA what our principle and purposes are as Unitarian Universalists. So when you hear reference to our 7 principles or our 6 sources, that's the language of Article 2. And as Unitarian Universalists, we commit to reviewing that language every 15 years. It's changed. It was changed from the original language in the 1960s to the language including the 7 principles and 6 sources. That was adopted in the mid-80s. And it hasn't really been changed since. A slight change in the 1990s, but nothing significant. And so this is really 30 years. The last 15-year mark, nothing changed. This year, they're proposing very significant changes to that language. Kirsten just put a link to the study commission page.
Yeah, but on there's a PDF download of the revisions that we voted on, which I thought was really interesting. So it has the exact wording, and I was a big fan of the changes actually, and it was words matter, right? And people put a lot of time and energy into every single word. which
Yeah,
is
there was a lot of intention in that rewrite. So right now at South Church, we are, we have themes each month in our worship service. The theme of justice and equity was this month of February. In January, we were talking about liberating love. So love at the center is a core part of this new language. And then there's these 6 values that are identified, including justice and equity. This coming March, we'll be talking about transformation, which is another one of the values. Interconnectedness, I think interconnectedness is another, pluralism, generosity, which we explored in November, I want to say. Justice, equity, transformation,
And
pluralism.
Are these national themes? Like, is everyone across the United States doing this at their congregations? These
So,
themes?
Yes and no and. So the way Unitarian Universalism works is we have something called congregational polity, which is why we have General Assembly, because each congregation has a voice in the decisions of our association. And every congregation gets to govern itself as well. So we vote on things like this, a change in the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association. As a congregation, we have votes on whether or not they change that language. But even if they change that language, it doesn't mean that as a congregation, we have to follow that language, because there's also a fair amount of democratic independence from congregation to congregation. So there are many congregations who are exploring these values, this Article 2 language, and are kind of on board with the good possibility that it's going to be adopted. There are some congregations who are not in favor of the changes, or are hoping that they don't get passed. It's not a completely tension-free question, and there are congregations that just aren't very engaged in the more national dialogue, and it'll take a long time for that language to infiltrate into the individual congregational culture if they're not engaging there. Lori.
Can I say something about the,
1 second. Lori had her hand up, and then after she does, go ahead. You can, Myra.
I actually have 2 questions I just want to get out there for now or a little bit later in the conversation. One is, if you're as a delegate, I assume that the delegate votes on behalf of the congregation. How does how does a delegate ascertain what is in the interest of the congregation? Secondly, what is the real time commitment for being a delegate over the course of General Assembly? Like in hours, and is it possible to be a good delegate without also participating in a lot of the other programmatic things that are going on, so that you're well informed?
Great questions. I will get into delegate details in a second, but first, Myra, go ahead and make your comment about the conversation we were having.
oh, okay, I also had something to say about delegates. So I just wanted to address the question about that Valerie had about themes. So there are 2 organizations, or I don't know what you would call them, committees or groups that publish themes. So we at South Church subscribe to something called Soulworks, and they have monthly themes. And by subscribing to that, we get the packets every month with ideas for worship services and music and RE and all of that sort of stuff. And so some congregations are on that track. There's another group also, I can't remember what that's called, but there's a competitor to Soulworks, which is something else. And Soul Matters, rather. We have Soul Matters, not Soulworks. And so people subscribe to that one, and they have different monthly themes that they are following to whatever degree you as a congregation choose to follow them. And then there are some congregations that don't do the theme thing at all. So I just wanted to clarify that. If I could just briefly answer Lori's question. So I think that as a delegate, if you're not going, right, you can choose to just go to the business meetings. And that the actual workshops, I don't think really inform the discussions at the business meeting in any way. That's my experience of it. they're really interesting, and some of them are very exciting and fun workshops, but they're not really dealing with the issues at the business meeting. You will get the agenda for the business meeting in advance and can just attend the business meetings, which is not a very big time commitment at all, right? Some of the meetings are 3 hours long, but it's not a big time commitment, I don't feel, over the course of the 4 days of the GA. And there is a different, I know that Kirsten will discuss this, there's a different registration fee for just going to the business part versus participating in the entire GA experience. And the question that you had, Lori, about how do you know how to vote on behalf of the congregation is really interesting, because the congregation hasn't really given, my experience in doing this for 2 congregations, given any guidance on on how to vote. So I suppose it's like, do congressmen are voting, or women, Congress people are voting, and you hope that they're voting understanding the how their constituency might vote, and I'm voting trying to put myself in the shoes of the congregation. But we don't have a mandate for how we have to vote on different issues.
Because
there are congregations that are much more that it's harder to be a delegate because there's more competition within the congregation to be a delegate, and being a delegate comes with more expectations because it's a more competitive thing. So first of all, the size of our congregation gives us the option of sending up to, I think it's 9 people, might be 8, but I think it's 9. So that's a pretty good number of delegates. A smaller congregation has fewer slots. So you could imagine if a congregation only has 2 or 3 delegates, there may be more competition and a stronger sense of, we need you to vote a certain way because we have opinions about this. So it isn't across the board that all UU congregations are like, you get to vote the way you want. But with South Church, yeah, it really is. It's a benefit that we have. We never use all of our delegate slots, and so there is not a lot of regulation around what you're supposed to do with that. I do try to give people opportunities to learn about, like, for example, Article 2, we did a lot of discussions and opportunities for people to engage with it, so that you have a chance to hear other members of the congregation if you're going to be a delegate. But again, the last 10, 15 years at South Church, we've only sent maybe 2 or 3 delegates each year. We have not been using those slots. So it's not super strict. And in terms of the question of how much time, I'm just going to share really briefly this screen so you can see. This is the order of business from last year. So the Wednesday session was 1.5 hours. You can see it includes like presenting rules of procedure. There's an award, some awards that are offered, some like it's informational. A lot of Wednesday was informational. The general session on Thursday was 3 hours long, call to order, opening words, and then Commission on Social Witness presented the action of immediate witnesses, and again, a lot of preliminary information. The Friday session was 3 hours, included a presidential candidate forum, so you got to hear from the president that we were voting on, and then voting on amendments for Article 2, voting on the divestment or discussing the divestment question. Saturday, 3 hours, and Sunday, 2 hours. And Sunday is really a close. So the 3 meaty days are Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Those 3-hour sessions are when most of the voting is happening. But saying that the robust amount of time, especially for online, you don't have to be at all of it. You know what the agenda is. You know what the questions are. You get a whole packet kind of telling you everything. And so if you're clear on something, you actually can just show up when the scheduled vote is for that thing. So a lot of people do not attend the entirety of all of the business sessions, or they take a break, or they go for a walk because they're like, this part I'm not really nobody is sort of policing how much of that time you're actually present for. And yeah, you could ostensibly only care about one thing and not really show up for the rest of it, and just engage with the issue that you're interested in.
But I would say yes, and the listening to the debate really helped to inform.
Right.
I mean, I think it would have been hard to vote without listening.
Yeah, I guess I picture in particular this question of like Article 2, you may feel pretty confident at this point. We've had years to explore it, and you may be pretty confident about being on board, or not on board. A thing about Article 2 that's very interesting, because this has been an interesting process to watch over the last several years. My understanding was that what we voted in last June was what we will vote on this June. But there is actually another few potential amendments being proposed prior to the final vote this year that include adding 2 other values. So I've heard peace and reason are, in addition to those 6 that I named. Let's see if I got them. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interconnectedness, and generosity are the 6 that are already in there. That are talking about adding peace and reason, because of the amount of feedback that has been that the commission has received around those 2 things feeling important to people. So there will be, I would imagine, a discussion on Thursday, a vote on the amendments on Friday, and then the vote for the full Article 2 language with or without those amendments, depending on how that goes this year.
And I think the other thing that changed, in addition to the kind of the principles turning into those values, is the way the sources are named. And I really appreciated the amendment to the sources and including science in there, and it was just a little bit more specific.
Yeah. The sources are the theological sources of our faith. So formally, the ones that are currently in the old language, it articulates very specifically, like Christian and Jewish teachings, world religions, science, lived experience, earth-based traditions, and another one. There's 6 of them. And the new language took a much less specified approach, because one of the critiques of that formal language was that it weighted things differently, like naming Jewish and Christian teachings and then world religions, right, was like this whole category of faith traditions that were kind of lumped together, and these 2 that were very specified. That was one example of a critique that I heard from people. No direct mention of Islam, Buddhism, Hindu, some of the biggest religious traditions in the globe, right, that are not even really, were not really named in, they were just sort of clumped in. So rather than try and make a comprehensive list that feels very balanced, they actually went in the direction of being a little more general about our faith traditions, and not putting quite so much of a list approach. So yeah, the things that get talked about, and the other thing was really one of the other critiques about Article 2 that was discussed was that our principles and purposes in the past were very static, not very dynamic, didn't really call you to anything, just kind of said, this is what we think. And the new one has a lot of like, we believe this and here's how we show it. So a lot more of sort of, what does it call you to do? How does it call you to live your faith?
And the amendments actually have even more action-oriented language, which I thought was neat.
Me too. Other questions or observations?
Do the delegates historically, even though we don't use all of ours, confer so that our delegates are voting as a block as opposed to dividing up their votes in various ways on issues?
I
No,
was told
voting-
to just vote the way I wanted to vote.
There are definitely churches that do. The delegates work together, and South Church hasn't in the time that I've been involved in South Church. there hasn't been conferring. Myra, did you want to say something about that?
And the reality is that there are a lot of votes, and if we send 2 or 3 people, we're not going to influence the outcome in any way, whether we vote in separately or or as a block. The results of the votes, I have never been involved where they were close. I mean, they're usually quite clear.
Mhm.
And big difference.
Yeah, and again, go ahead.
No,
So
it's all right. Mary.
My question has to do because I heard that I heard reference to workshops. It seems like there are these big blocks of time for the business component, and I'm guessing that the workshops are at the other parts of the day. Is that how it runs?
That is how it runs. So I'll share a little glimpse of the program book from 2023 so you can see. And I will say something different about the online General Assembly as compared to an in-person. And actually even in person now, because post-COVID, we do so much hybrid. Even when there's an in-person General Assembly, a lot of things are offered in a hybrid context. So there is the opportunity to view workshops after the fact. So in other words, if you are interested in workshops, but you know that weekend is a really busy weekend, you can enroll, not enroll, what's the word? Register for General Assembly and watch the workshops later. So obviously you wouldn't then have the benefit of like any live Q&A or whatever might be included. But for myself, when I've been attending over the last 4 years, all kinds of things come up at the same time as other things. So I've really loved that I can go and look. I spend like the next 2 months kind of catching different things that I missed live but wanted to catch. So here's a picture of, this is from 2023. This is last year's program. So you can see there's a workshop slot from 12:30 to 2 before the general session. There's a worship slot before that. And then on this day, there was a Side with Love rally. So there was like a public action that was scheduled and a worship service and lecture in the evening. This was the Saturday program. And some like social things that are going on as well. I'll scroll down and show you one other thing. Don't get dizzy. Look away for a second.
There's also a big exhibit hall, right? And there's vendors.
Right.
There's a big bookstore and all the different schools are there.
Yeah. So this is 106 pages, this program. So I'm trying to get to like, but here's just a couple workshops. So this is a Friday example from Friday. There's a workshop on UU the Vote, mapping our impact, charting our future, right? I'm sure there will be UU the Vote workshops this year leading up to the presidential election. So you can, if you are a social justice associate, you could go and find out about what other congregations are doing to engage people in the voting process. There's a budget hearing that you could go and attend before the vote on the budget. Anybody recognize somebody in that picture there? Is Andrew McGeorge. He actually does not work for the UUA anymore, but he was the CFO for the UUA last year. This is a bridging workshop. Here's a workshop called Deeper Than the Skin, which is a musical presentation. It had Reggie Harris, Greg Greenway was amazing. A racial justice workshop. There's a lot of social justice workshops. There's a lot of like congregational leadership workshops, ways to engage, creative ideas for all kinds of challenges that congregations share. There's a lot of commonality between different churches and the things they struggle with. This was a workshop on class inclusivity and in the faith community. lots of spirituality workshops, a mental health workshop. Imani Perry was the Ware lecturer last year. She's amazing. I don't know if anybody has read any of her books, but her most recent one, South to America, is fantastic. I highly recommend it. So tons and tons of workshops. You get a big catalog that you can look at, and again, you can attend them after the fact. You can go and watch them for, I think they stay available for 2 or 3 months afterwards. Some of them stay available forever, but yeah. Other questions? What haven't we covered yet?
So technically, what do you actually do to become a delegate? Do you just say, "Oh, I want to be a delegate"? Or
excellent question. Yeah, so technically, you say, I am interested in being a delegate, and you either let myself or Reverend Ellen know, or a board member directly, or Jen Leiden. The board has to approve delegates. So, you know, if there was a huge rush on delegates and 16 people said they want to be a delegate, then we would have to figure out a process for that. But pretty much, yeah, that's what you do. You say, I want to be a delegate, and you let somebody in leadership know, and then we put you on the list, and the board votes on it, probably at the board meeting in March or April, maybe even May. I'm not sure when they will, depending on if, you know, maybe we could do it at more than one board. I don't know if they have a set time, certainly before June, so that you get your credentials, and then you have to sign up online with your UUA credentials. But Jen Leiden kind of helps you with that process. And as I think we mentioned, but maybe we didn't, there is a registration fee for General Assembly. However, you do not have to pay if you just want to be a delegate. So if someone was interested in just doing the voting, that is an option. Here is
virtually, you don't have to pay. Yeah.
Virtually. So if you look here, the registration fee for full access to all of the programming is $280. That's through March 15th. After March 16th, it goes up a little bit. And after May 15th, it goes up a little more. So there's an early bird benefit. If you want to attend workshops, sign up early. It's much cheaper. But as you see, if you scroll down to the bottom, or if you look down below that first line, the business online only delegate platform is by donation. So if you want to make a contribution to the UUA, you can, but you don't have to. You could be a delegate at no cost. Yeah, so there's that. And the other thing that I was sharing with the group that was on early is that I do think there are some worship services and things that are available for anyone to watch during General Assembly. So if you're curious, but not able to make the commitment of attending General Assembly, keep your eyes open around the time of GA, which is June 20th to the 23rd, because even just watching an online worship service is so worth it. It's just a different scale. And it's like really very talented religious professionals within our faith, and choirs and things that are fun to see. So I highly recommend that. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left, so.
Well, I would like to do it again. I would like to be a business only delegate. Yeah, for sure. I want to see the Article 2 thing through.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
And Judith, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to throw this in. This is fascinating for me. When I went, I just looked up to see when it was in Minnesota. It was 2010. That's 20 more years ago. I took my daughter. I was in divinity school, and I had to take her with me. She was a newly adopted child. I had her in the children's program, and I loved everything I did there. And especially, I would say, you know, the worship sessions. The music still stays with me now. So, and I did not apply to be a delegate. I was in divinity school, and it just wouldn't fit then. and I didn't feel the need for it, so I wasn't a candidate. I stayed in a hotel nearby, recommended by them, and it was I couldn't attend everything I wanted because of my daughter, but I got a lot out of it and took it back to divinity school with me. And even now, that's how I processed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I guess I will say that you can also go to General Assembly and not be a delegate and not do any of the governance stuff and just go to workshops, and that could be very enriching as well. So it takes all kinds in our faith. We all have our passions and our interests, and not everybody's interested in being in governance sessions. That's fair. Not all of us are wonks.
I came to this session because I wanted to learn more about Article 2. You know, there is a session going on, but it's not it's not that I can visualize it. I mean, it's written, not virtual. So I'm glad to know about Article 2.
Yeah, and if anyone has more questions about Article 2, please feel free to reach out to me. I know a lot about it, and I'm also happy to share resources about it, because I do think that it is a really significant thing, and having a sense of the process behind it really enriches it to me. At least for me, that's been the case. Like understanding some of the thinking behind some of these changes and understanding all of the different voices and perspectives that they have been striving to integrate really makes the whole process more intriguing to me. I love that we have a faith that recognizes that we change and evolve and grow and learn about ourselves, and that we have to always be thinking about who we are. I think that's just the coolest thing. So yeah.
It is, and I know we're about out of time. I'll just mention that I have a helper who helps me now with things, and she has become interested. She, you know, so today she was asking me about it, and I knew that she was interested a couple of months ago, and I saved our sources and you know, for her, so I gave them to her, and I find that without even, I'm not recruiting anybody, but they become interested. My nephew, my daughter, my helper. So pretty soon they'll all be online. And I'd like to reach out to you about the Article 2 so I can explain it better.
Great. Yeah, do so, Judith. I would love that. That's great. And thank you for talking about it. We should talk about our faith more, I think, not as like, not to try and coerce people, but people don't know about it. And when they find it, I often hear people say, gosh, I wish I knew about this a long time ago, because it really does. When it speaks to you, it speaks to you. So yeah, that's real. I will say for everyone, uua.org/GA, tons and tons and tons of information you can explore. And like there's a whole section for newcomers, there's registration forms and just information about all kinds of things. A lot of it is from 2023 right now. They will be updating it as things get set for 2024, but anything you're curious about related to GA or being a delegate, you can probably find on there, and you're always welcome to contact myself or any of the learning associates who are available on email, learningassociates@southchurch-uu.org. Mary, do you have closing words for us?
Why, Kirsten, yes, I do.
Lovely. I have a chalice to extinguish.
Okay. Let me find them. Go out now with hearts and hands and minds renewed to the world that is waiting for you. Go out to that world to bring your gentle touch to those in pain. Go out to feed and house those in need. Go out to speak truth to those with power. Go out with courage to do the work which calls you. Go out now with your passion and faith to change the world.
Thank you for that, Mary. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Night, everyone.